welcome into another edition of the Two Guys from Wisconsin podcast. My name is Logan, and I am joined once again by Jake Sussick. We decided we were going to do a all NFL podcast. The Packers play their first preseason game. They play in the Hall of Fame game, so they will have 5 preseason games. So we thought, hey, why don't we do a podcast about the NFL? Because it is here. It's finally here, Jake. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing great. Hey, I just tweeted Aaron Rodgers, telling him how I'm gonna just rip him apart on this podcast.
Why?
We'll get him to listen to it someday.
He's already got enough stuff going on with his brother on The Bachelorette, throwing him under the bus and stuff like that. So, do you have any comments on that before we actually get to real football?
The Bachelorette?
Yeah, his brother's on it, and he says Aaron Rodgers has no relationship with with the family, and that he doesn't do anything, and they don't talk to him, and Rodgers has had to field these questions and stuff like that. I don't know.
I'm sorry. I'm busy being the greatest quarterback ever. Excuse me if I'm selfish.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah, I don't care. Amanda watches that show every time it's on, and she really likes this Jordan Rodgers character. Actually, did you know the only Vanderbilt quarterback in its history to take them to back-to-back bowl games was Jordan Rodgers? So there's your little fun fact of the day.
I thought his brother was Richard Rodgers.
Yeah, can't you see the resemblance when they hit on that Hail Mary? You see how much they loved each other? Okay.
Hey, speaking of Hail
question.
Marys, did you watch the family night game?
No, I didn't. It was on TV, and I wasn't able to watch it.
Hey, I don't want to say Aaron looked great, but Aaron looked great.
Well, I mean, he's great. I mean, that's just what he is. I have a question for you, though. Tighter relationship right now. Aaron Rodgers. Does Aaron Rodgers have a better relationship with his brother Jordan Rodgers or tight end extraordinaire Richard Rodgers? Go.
Definitely Richard Rodgers.
Definitely Richard Rodgers. I'm gonna go
ahead. You see how they hook up on those red zone passes?
Well, maybe during the podcast you'll get a response from Aaron, and you'll figure you can ask him that question personally, and we'll see if he'll respond for us. So, Packers, man, it was kind of a weird season last year. No Jordy Nelson. The offense was extremely stagnant. Eddie Lacy was fat as hell, and just could not get anything going. And you come into this year, and I think it's a totally different vibe. Because towards the end of the year, I think most Packers fans were pretty disappointed with how the regular season went for us. The playoffs were very exciting. Obviously, the playoff win against Washington, and then a hell of a game. One of the more fun games I've watched in recent memory against the Arizona Cardinals, where you have Rodgers connect on a Hail Mary to the people's champ, Jeff Janis, and send that into overtime. And then, it takes one play for Arizona, 2 plays with Larry Fitzgerald.
That was so crazy.
Oh, man. So we're coming into a new year here. A lot of people criticize the Packers draft, but really, from top to bottom, when you look at this team, it's one of the more talented rosters out there. Winston may disagree as he's crying in the background, but I think when you look at it from top to bottom, offensively and defensively, it's one of the better rosters in the entire league. What's your perception, I guess, of the Packers this year?
I think that they have all the tools, man. I think it's great. I really liked what I saw. I know it's just a family night scrimmage, and they're not exactly going as hard as they can, but they look dialed in already. The offense did.
Yep.
It was really fun to watch, and Eddie Lacy looked pretty damn good. Aaron was putting the ball where Aaron always puts it. Their passing game looks phenomenal.
Yep.
I know there's no pressure on the quarterback because obviously they don't want to hurt him, but still, the timing is there. Everything's there. something I want to tell you is I was watching it with my roommate, and I was wondering where that toss was. And they ran the toss. They ran the toss for negative yards.
Was it with Eddie?
No, it was with whoever was in at the time. I can't remember who was in, but they ran the toss for negative yards. And I got to tell you, I think throughout the McCarthy era, that thing has probably gotten us 43 yards and a half a touchdown.
Well, if they did it with a scat back, it would work. But their idea is to run it with Eddie Fat Lacy. I had to censor myself there, but it's just so frustrating. And we can go ahead and get into that. But why, McCarthy is seen as an offensive guru. You have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. You have a powerhouse at running back, and it just sometimes seems like they do stuff that just does not fit with their personnel. Like, even last year, they refused to change with the way the roster was constructed, not having Jordy, having a tight end who is slow and couldn't run the out routes. They would still do it, and it was extremely frustrating. But from what you're saying, it seems like that toss just is not going to die, is it?
No, it's going to be, I think it's a staple of his playbook.
Well, it's
every time he opens his playbook, that's what he sees, and he wants to run it.
Well, it's like that old Packers sweep. Every team has always had the sweep, but it's just like, man, do you have to do it with Eddie Lacy?
God, do you have to do it with anybody?
You can't, you can't try it with Starks, who's a little speedy, or Brandon Ross or Crockett or something like that. Brandon Ross is pretty quick from what I remember in his days in Maryland. He's a little guy. You try that stuff with him. Maybe he can get to the edge and go. But, you know what I'm also really excited about? I know you're talking about the offense for family night, but I really think this team, even though they did not address middle linebacker, I think they've got some really, really solid defensive potential to be back in the top 10 defensively. You and me have talked about, I think, before, our love for Mike Daniels. Pennell was solid last year. Obviously, middle linebacker is a problem, but it seems like they're moving Clay back to outside linebacker. Clay and Peppers still can get after the quarterback. It sounds like the young corners are still playing really well. Demarius Randall, Quentin Rollins have played fantastic. It sounds like. Even in some practices, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. They are occasionally moving Morgan Burnett to middle linebacker in some dime packages, kind of copycatting what Arizona likes to do with their very talented secondary. What are your thoughts on Morgan Burnett maybe seeing some snaps at middle linebacker?
It depends. You said it's coming out of the dime. I would like to see more speed backs on the field, speed defensive players. I always like to see Clay Matthews out there, and I thought he did really well filling in as an inside linebacker in the 3-4. So he wouldn't be a bad option for that. A guy I'm really looking to step up this year is Blake Martinez. I've been hearing pretty good things about him coming out of the inside linebacker position. So
yeah, and
it's going to be interesting to see. I like to see a lot of speed, so that way we can get to the quarterback faster.
Yep, and it's kind of been silent on all fronts out of the middle linebacker position. Barrington was the starter before, but you're really not hearing anything solid as to whose position that is. You mentioned Martinez. I've heard a lot of good things out of him at camp. They really liked Kyler Fackrell. I know he's more of an outside linebacker type, but he is a bigger guy, 6'5", and I in college he was able to run with tight ends and stuff like that and go sideline to sideline. So I'd be curious to see how he does as well. And I mean, you can't forget about Jake Ryan. He played well last year. When he was kind of thrust into it, he wasn't great. He wasn't terrible, but I mean, he did the job. So I definitely think middle linebacker is the position to keep an eye on in camp and throughout all of preseason. And I also want to see the progression that, you talked about the secondary. I want to see progression out of Haha. I want to see, Micah Hyde on the field as much as possible. We have 3 very, very good safeties in Micah Hyde, Clinton Dix, and Morgan Burnett. So, creative ways they can get all 3 of them on the field, I think will really help them out defensively.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of position battles going on at middle linebacker, kind of like what you just hinted on. But like you said, I think finally for the first time in a long time, we're deep in the secondary position.
Yep.
And I think we need to make that work to our advantage, as you see other teams like the Seahawks doing. Yeah. And
Arizona especially is really good at that.
Arizona, yeah, that's the other one. But I don't know, I think we have the makings to be a really great team if we stay healthy. That's something the Packers always struggle with.
Yep. And, you talked about depth. Not only depth, but versatility. I mean, Micah Hyde is a guy who can play safety, and you've seen him at corner. Just mentioned Morgan Burnett as a guy who they want to see at middle linebacker. Sam Shields is a guy who you can put him anywhere, at the cornerback spots. Randall and Rollins played fantastic last year, and I'm kind of curious to see how they use them as well. Obviously Clay has been able to still be put at middle linebacker and be successful. So it's kind of nice to see, and I didn't even mention Nick Perry yet, who apparently has come back into camp looking fantastic. He's played excellent defense. It sounds like he may even take snaps from Peppers, who is essentially just going to pin his ears back and rush the passer every time. So Nick Perry has been outstanding in run downs in practice so far. So I'd be curious to see how they use Nick Perry going forward as well. He's a guy who was a first-round pick for us that just, could never stay healthy, could never find the field. But really towards the end of last year, you started to hear his name a lot more. So, and obviously, he's a guy who's coming up pretty close to another contract. So you always have to be curious about that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, you're right. If they can avoid injuries, they should be one of the best teams in the NFC, if not all of the NFL.
Hey, I got a question for you, Logan. I like to play with the depth chart. What do you think would happen if they moved Julius Peppers to outside linebacker and Clay on the other end?
Well, I mean, technically, I think that's what they do. I think they do list Peppers at outside linebacker, but, Clay hasn't been able to play outside significantly, or predominantly, for the last season and a half. But, I mean, I do recall that when Peppers was brought in to Green Bay, they were really, really successful that first year they were together, if I'm not mistaken. Him and Clay on either side, it is a problem. I mean, there's no doubt about it that it is a problem for people. What did he have in his first year? Like 7.5 sacks, 8 sacks for Peppers, and he could get after the quarterback. He was solid against the run, and he's a guy in Peppers who has a nose for the football. It seems like he's really keen on forcing turnovers. I think in his time in Green Bay, he's already forced like 8 turnovers or 9 turnovers. And we all know
he has that IQ. He has that awareness about him.
Yeah. And he's a veteran. Now, you could say he's slowing down. He is 35 or 36. I can't exactly remember, but he's been productive still. And with his ability to get after the football, to get after the quarterback, and his keen ability to force some turnovers, you would just assume that, putting Clay back at outside linebacker, those two would just wreak havoc. But I mean, it really does depend on how things go at middle linebacker, and you just hope that, we figure that out in preseason. We're not week one, at Jacksonville, still not sure what we're doing at that position.
Right. So this is how they have it listed now. This is before the preseason games. They have Peppers, left outside linebacker, Clay, right outside linebacker, Barrington, Ryan in the middle.
Okay.
Now, why can't you put Clay back in the middle, take Nick Perry, put him at the other outside linebacker, and then you can settle your inside linebacker dispute?
I would not be surprised. So let's say Barrington suffers a setback. I have a feeling that is the lineup you're going to see. Now, let's say that doesn't even happen, and let's say Nick Perry just in his playing time on third down or on rushing downs or something like that, he plays really well. You could see them moving Clay back to middle. You always want the best players on the field whenever you can. And if all this stuff I'm reading and hearing about Nick Perry is true, I don't think that it would take very long for them to move Clay back to middle. Now, I know that he is an elite pass rusher, and that is why you pay him that money. But, Dom Capers has been able to come up with some pretty interesting schemes that, you still maybe don't know where the rush is coming. So Clay still at the middle linebacker position can still go ahead and rush the quarterback and get after him.
I thought he looked great at inside linebacker last year. I really did. I liked him playing there.
And, it's a position he wasn't familiar with, and he just not only did he accept the role, but he kind of thrived there for a while.
He did. He was making plays. Defenses didn't know what to do with that kind of speed at inside linebacker.
Yep. So I have another question for you. What are your thoughts on the wide receiver position? Jordy Nelson, it came out and said he had a setback in his other knee, not the knee with the ACL, but his other knee. And it sounds like they're kind of going to just take it easy with him throughout preseason. Obviously, Randall Cobb, Devontae Adams needs to step up big time. Ty Montgomery's coming back from an injury. Jeff Janis, the People's Champ, made some plays last year, but in camp, a lot of reports are coming out that he still cannot understand the offense and isn't really clicking with Rodgers. We drafted Trevor Davis. There could be potential for this team to keep a lot of wide receivers, but I'm just curious what your thoughts are on the wide receiving core. Who do you think will stay, and who do you think may wind up getting cut?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. Just picking up from what I saw from the family night scrimmage, Jared Abbrederis played a lot of snaps, and he looked really good. Him and Rodgers were in sync. They were in sync to the max. It was awesome to see, not only because he's a hometown Wisconsin guy, he's played in Wisconsin his whole career, but him and Rodgers looked like they were connecting really well, and I like to see that. In terms of the Jordy Nelson, I'm glad they're taking precaution to sit him out. I don't care if he doesn't play a snap in preseason. I really don't.
Yeah, me neither.
He's going to come back. And I know we talked in the past about how Jared Abbrederis might not make the starting role on offense in the slot. He might just be a special teams guy, but I'm thinking differently now. I see him and Aaron connecting a lot.
I mean, I just am worried that he's only going to find the field and he's only going to have two routes. And if you're not versatile, it's been proven, if you're not versatile in the Packers offense, they can find someone else. So that's the only thing I'm worried about with him.
Right. I did not see Jared Cook play, however, for tight end. He didn't really get in there much. Randall Cobb looked great. Jeff Janis didn't really get in there much. I didn't see him play a lot. Ty Montgomery, I didn't see him play a lot.
Yeah, he's I think he's still nursing an injury.
Yeah, I think I might have seen him on the sidelines. But like I said, man, and Brett Hundley, you can tell he doesn't have the power Aaron does in his arm, but he's smart. I like the decisions he was making out there. They weren't bad decisions.
Yeah, I think Hundley is, we've talked about this before. I think he's another candidate for, how the Packers always used to build up these quarterbacks and trade them off. I think Hundley is a candidate for, someone 3 or 4 years down the line needs a quarterback. He may be that guy. He either may be that guy for us, depending on what happens with Rodgers. I know Rodgers says he wants to play, I think, until he's 38 or 40 or something like that. So in 5 or 6...
he wants like another 10 more years.
Yeah. Hundley, a little raw coming out of college, but he showed that he had the tools at UCLA. So I'm really curious to see how he handles preseason. I thought he had a strong preseason last year. He took his lumps and made his rookie mistakes. But I'm really curious to see how he does now that he is the set-in-stone number 2 quarterback. I'm glad you brought him up because he's a guy I think is really interesting because backup quarterback is a huge deal. When
it really is.
Especially when you're a very good team and you have a good quarterback. You never know what can happen, and when you have a team that's poised for a championship. If you have a guy that can just get you through, that, you can still hang around. Like with Denver. Denver had a quarterback, after the stuff with Peyton went on, they had a quarterback in Osweiler who could essentially hold the fort down, keep things going, keep things moving until they determined Peyton would get the ball back or whatever, or was fully healthy. And you hope that Hundley, being a young guy, just like Osweiler was, Hundley can handle that type of responsibility if called upon. So I'm really curious to see how this preseason goes for him, and I'm really excited to see him play.
So you asked me what I think of the receiving core and what I want to see out of them.
Yep.
When I look at this receiving core, I see the potential for a very, very potent dink and dunk offense. Now, for people who don't know what that is, that might be listening, it's slant routes, out routes, an abundance of them, short yardage passes that lure the defense in, so that way you can go over the top with a Jordy Nelson.
Yep.
That's what I see the Packers offense with the wide receiving core shaping up to be. If they run that style, they will be the best.
Nope. You still there, Jake?
I am here. Do you hear me?
Yep, now I got you. Go ahead.
Okay, I was just saying, if they play that style of offense, they will be the best at it in the NFL. I wouldn't mind seeing Jordy Nelson as a 1, Devontae Adams as a 2, and Randall Cobb coming out of the slot.
Yep, I think that's what their plan was last year. And then Jordy with his injury, it was James Jones has to be on your outside, but I would really expect I would hope a bounce back year from Devontae Adams. It sounds like he's doing solid in camp. But he is a guy who had a lot of expectations last year, and that essentially doubled when Jordy went out, and he laid an egg. There's really no kind way to put it. He played terribly, dropped passes. He does that weird jump thing whenever a ball's thrown to him. You notice how wide receivers, or even you just go and play at the park, certain guys will just jump to catch the football. He kind of has that, and I think it really throws him off sometimes. It puts him in awkward positions. He had a rough year. If he can bounce back and be the guy not even progress from his year one, but be the guy he was in year one, to be a threat opposite Jordy, and to be a guy who can create some space for Cobb to run across the middle, and hopefully eventually Ty Montgomery, because it sounds like they have a lot of stock put into Ty Montgomery, and he played well before he got hurt. So, I mean, Adams has to step up. Aberderis was able to find the field last year. You'd have to expect he would make the team. You talked about him in the family night game. And I'm just really curious to see at the back end who is going to be that sixth guy, that is your special teamer, is your, the guy you look to if there's an injury. You like Janice. I think Janice is probably a shoo-in to make the team. So I'm just really curious to see what happens there.
I want to see if you can make the same comparison as I did. When you think of Randall Cobb, what former Packers wide receiver does he remind you of the most?
Kind of, I mean, I know Brooks was bigger, but kind of Robert Brooks. Just really fast, kind of athletic. I don't know, that's kind of what he reminds me of.
I think when Cobb comes over the middle on slants, he reminds me a lot of a younger Donald Driver.
Donald Driver could hammer the slants.
He was a great possession wideout. He comes over the middle on the slants and then takes it for as many yards as he can and then got down. And he didn't take any punishment. I think that's what I could see Randall Cobb turning into. He has the ability for it.
Yeah. So, I just with Robert Brooks, I really like that Cobb comparison. But you're not wrong. I mean, you're not far off with Driver. I mean, I just remember Driver being that young wide receiver with Favre, and just all the excitement that was. Speaking of Favre, I have a question for you, Jake. So, he's going into the Hall of Fame this weekend, and there was a picture tweeted out today of all these guys in the Hall of Fame. They have like this locker, right? And they have their jerseys in the locker. Well, Brett Favre's in his locker has two jerseys. One, a Green Bay Packers jersey, and another of the Minnesota Vikings. A team he didn't win anything with, but a team he went to. Not a Jets jersey, but a Vikings jersey. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I saw that picture. I think it's 100% silly. It's kind of disrespectful to a Packers fan because he did all of his milestones and stuff in the Packers uniform. And he made all of his money in the Packers uniform. He became a Hall of Famer in the Packers uniform. Mm-hmm. So I don't know why they would include the Minnesota Vikings.
Now, it got so bad.
I think it's just stupid.
It got so bad on Twitter that the Hall of Fame had to respond and say, we put the Vikings jersey in there because he broke the record for most consecutive starts when he was a Viking. So that was their explanation for putting the Vikings uniform in there.
I think that's a terrible explanation. Didn't he break the most interceptions in their jersey too?
I mean, technically he was done. Wasn't that his last pass? Was his last pass an interception?
I'm pretty sure his last pass of his career was an interception.
Oh, Brett. But no, I
saw that picture too.
I'm actually really curious to see how this Hall of Fame thing goes with him. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't have NFL Network, but I may go someplace that has it just so I can watch it.
Think of the journey he took, though. He started out with the Atlanta Falcons.
Right.
They didn't want him. They saw no potential in him. And then he went straight to the Packers, did he not?
Did you know when he was traded to the Packers, he failed the physical? And Ron
I
Wolf.
know that he had his problems.
Well, he failed the physical because they thought something with his back or his ankle. It was a medical physical. And they, one of the doctors flagged him for his ankle or his back, and Ron Wolf said, "I don't care, I want him, forget it." And it's kind of crazy what happened after.
He turned out to be a
Hall of Famer.
Hall of Fame quarterback for us, yeah. And he started what could potentially be a very, very long franchise for the Packers at the quarterback position. Because now who is Rodgers going to teach?
Yep.
And be the next person to lead the Packers to a Super Bowl. He started a chain.
Do you think it's Hundley? Or do you think that someone else comes along?
I don't know if it's Hundley. I think it might be too early on to start having Aaron take someone under his wing. Yeah.
Oh, I agree.
I think there's going to be a guy that we don't know of yet that's going to come along, and he's going to fit the role, and Aaron's going to take him under his wing, and he's going to be the next man up.
Yep. One more Packer quarterback related question I have for you, as we're going to add Kyle in here to the call, hopefully. Okay, so who would you rather take? So not rather take, how about this? Who was your favorite as Packers quarterback? Would you take, was it Rodgers for you, or was it Favre for you? Jake, you can go ahead first.
I would take Rodgers. He's way more calculated. He doesn't take as many risks. I feel like he's more safe with the football.
Mm-hmm. Any other reason why? Like, you would take Rodgers? Or you say Rodgers?
No, I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. Mm-hmm. He's more mobile in the pocket, but for similarities, they're kind of the same, but at the same time, they're not. So I'm taking Rodgers just for the aspect that he makes better decisions, I feel.
All right, Kyle, you're up next if you can hear us. We were just talking about, not based on skill or anything like that, but who was your favorite Packers quarterback? Is it Rodgers or is it Favre? If you had to pick one, who would you pick and why? All right, I don't think we have Kyle here. So I'm going to go ahead and do mine. If I had to pick one, I honestly think it would be, I mean, it's so hard because, Favre was the quarterback when I was a kid and when I was really getting into the Packers. And Rodgers has kind of been the quarterback since I've been an adult. So it's always been really, really difficult, to kind of decide. But I think I would have to pick Rodgers just based off of, I've had more fun watching Rodgers be the quarterback just based on skill than I have probably any other player in any other sport. So I think we finally have Kyle here. So Kyle, we were just talking about what quarterback, Favre or Rodgers, we would rather have, or that was our favorite. So not based off skill, but just as a Packers fan, what quarterback was your favorite, Rodgers or Favre?
The Magic Man doesn't get any love for this segment?
Well, I wasn't cognizant enough to understand what the Magic Man was doing when I was young, so unfortunately we have to rule Mikowski out.
Alright, well, I'd probably go with Favre, just in the aspect of, that's what kind of got me into football, is watching him play. I mean, granted, I've been more frustrated watching when I was watching Favre than I ever was with Aaron. But sometimes I like Brett's willingness to try to make big play instead of Aaron's conservative at sometimes, I guess. There's always that one moment that always stands with me, and it was the 07 NFC Championship game that I could never forget about. But that was just who Brett Favre was.
you lived by the sword, you died by the sword with Favre. That was for sure. But before we got to this, did you see that in his locker in Canton, he has a Vikings jersey and a Packers jersey hanging in his locker?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. I really am. I mean, he broke the touchdown record in a Vikings jersey, and that's, from what I read, that was the jersey that he was wearing when he broke the record. He is going in as a Packer, and if he has a Vikings jersey in, like, I understand it because that's the one that he was wearing with breaking the touchdown record. But when everybody knows he's going in as a Packer player, so it's not really gonna bother me at all.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that same boat. Like, I when I saw it, I just laughed. Like, I don't take it too seriously. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I'm just really curious to see how the ceremony goes on Saturday.
Yeah.
Jake?
What's up?
So, do you have... Kyle, we're getting a lot of background stuff on your phone.
Yeah, I'm Wednesday night volleyball league.
Oh, I see. Okay, man. All right. So, do you have any comments you want to make about this Packers team? Me and Jake have kind of gone over it a little bit, but anything you would like to say before we change gears here?
Like aspect of the team, like what I think of what I.
Yeah, like what are your expectations?
Expectations. You gotta see Super Bowl. You really do. I mean, with the wide receivers they have, obviously the best quarterback in the league. I said it. I don't care. And the offensive line, arguably top 5 in the league if they stay healthy. You know, Bakhtiari. I wish he could play a little bit more consistent. The major things that I don't that probably might hold them back is maybe their linebacking core. Just because there's so much inexperience. The defensive line looks solid. You got Daniels, who is probably one of the most undervalued defensive linemen in the league, as far as I'm concerned. He finally got paid to be the top player that he is for the defense. The secondary, it has some question marks. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, it's just young. They both Randall and
Rollins
both played very well last year. Hopefully they can keep it continued, and hopefully Sam Shields can finally step into that role of the Charles Woodson, Al Harris type to help keep them motivated and playing to their caliber.
Yeah, me.
And Tim Massey's on this team at the end of the preseason. I will be highly disappointed too. He is probably one of the worst punters in the game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see how that goes. I mean, you know, they always bring guys into camp, and you never really expect a change to happen. But I think this could be the year where, you know, it was flirted with last year. Mastay maybe, you know, finally losing his job, but I mean, what's the deal with the Pack? I mean, Mastay was really solid his first 2 years, and then just dove off a cliff with his average and his hang time and everything. So, the Packers.
It's just funny, but there's times where he punts it and he gets maybe 35, 40 yards, and it just gives them in a great field position, putting the defense on their heels.
Yep. I mean, I don't even know the name of the guy they brought into camp, so that tells you how much I know. But I do know that it's seriously being considered.
But let's just hope it's a former Euro player that was really good at soccer.
I mean, that's the way it works, right?
You don't have to pay him hardly anything, and they can kick the hell out of the ball. That's all you need.
Yep.
Well, angling and everything. But.
So, do you... I mean, obviously, the NFC North, the top half of it was very strong last year. Obviously, the Packers didn't win the division. They went farther in the playoffs, but the Vikings were the team that won the division. going to go ahead and start with you, Jake. Do you think that happens again, or do you think this healthy Packers team reclaims their spot back on top of the NFC North?
Yeah, Kyle touched on this a little bit. I think we all touched on it today. If the Packers stay healthy, they're world beaters. No one's going to beat them. Not in the NFC North anyways. I think they reclaim that championship spot up there if they stay healthy.
Do you think I mean, it's not like the Vikings are a terrible team. I mean, they leave a little bit to be desired at quarterback. Teddy Bridgewater is still young, and I don't think they've really completely taken the reins off him yet. But that defense is legit in Minnesota. The Packers have been successful against it. They played well against them in that game in Minnesota, and then that game in Lambeau was just an atrocity for all to watch. But I think the Vikings are legit. I do think that the Packers will probably take that division. Kyle, what are your thoughts on the North? Is there anyone to challenge the Packers at the top if they can stay healthy?
Yeah, it's the Vikings. I don't really expect much from the Lions. I expect the Lions to be rid of the 500 mark. Very good. Between losing their best wide receiver, I'd be up with bench. I mean, I know Alshon Jeffries is there, but I think he's still on contract dispute. Is he even accused yet? Or he got the franchise tag. I know he was going to be going for more money, but the Vikings are really good. I don't want to say that, but they are. Their biggest blemish is probably quarterback, but you don't really see that great of a quarterback when you're just giving the ball to Adrian Peterson. You know, you'll have to do is throw it a couple of times to make it on.
Has this been the latest in a conversation about the Vikings that we've mentioned Adrian Peterson? I mean, really, he's kind of been a guy who has been consistently great, but doesn't really. I mean, outside of fantasy, he kind of just isn't seen as like one of the guys anymore. And I wonder if that whole thing with his son has something to do with it. But I mean, he is still a monster, and you have to be worried about him.
I'll tell you the reason why, though. He had so much time off, Logan.
Yeah. And
he gained experience. He gained knowledge and wisdom. And he still has fresh legs because he had so many years off. I think it worked out in his favor.
Well, if that was the case, Ray Rice should probably go for 2,000 yards if someone picked him this year.
Hey, no, don't pull a Randy Beatty. Don't pull a Randy Beatty now. Be careful. But, I mean, honestly, outside of the Vikings, I think the Bears, they did what the Bears do. They go out, they spend money on players that are kind of in the middle to above average at their position. They give them tons of money, like they did with Trevathan.
Yep.
The Lions are still, they have, individually, there are players on the Lions that I like. They have still not been able to find a unit that works together. So I don't expect the Lions to be a real threat either. I honestly think, though, it is going to be a fight between Green Bay and the Vikings down the last couple of weeks. Minnesota at Green Bay, December 24th, Week 16, I think is going to be your determining game of the NFC North. So have that circled. Christmas comes a day early on December 24th when the Packers play the Vikings at 1 o'clock, because that is going to be, I think, the game right there.
I got a question for Kyle, if Kyle can hear me.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Logan and I had a discussion earlier. Who does Randall Cobb remind you of in terms of former Packers wide receivers?
That's a good question. Maybe like a Bill Schroeder a little bit.
He was my third choice. Bill Schroeder. Jake, go ahead and let him know who you said.
I thought when he comes over the middle on slant routes, he reminded me a lot of the great Donald Driver.
I would say that with just going across the middle, but Donald Driver was a good wide receiver. Not saying anything against him, but Randall Cobb can do so much more than Donald Driver could.
Athletically.
Yeah, and that's why I liked. That's why I still fell shorter. I mean, he wasn't a very good wide receiver, but his form has speed, shiftiness, kick returns, punt returns. You know, if you gave him a ball in open space, he was gone. But it just didn't happen much.
I said Robert Brooks because honestly, Rodgers and Cobb hook up on some ridiculous jump ball passes. Like that catch Cobb made last year where he broke his ribs was a ridiculous catch. He makes a lot of these go up and get it, even for him being a smaller guy. And that reminded me of Brooks with Favre. Robert Brooks would go up and just make these catches because he could get up there. And that's what reminded me, that's what Cobb kind of reminds me of when he could do that, because he has the speed aspect as well.
Yeah.
And Robert could burst a little bit. But hopefully Randall doesn't have the same issues that Robert did with injuries. So, but why don't we go ahead and change gears here? We talked about the NFC North. What are some teams that you guys are seeing that are maybe flying under the radar right now? Kind of changing gears from the Packers. What's the team that you're seeing that's kind of flying under the radar, not really getting any respect? Jake, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
I want to say the Texas Texans. No, I think, gosh, can you ever really count out the Falcons?
I mean, really,
with Matty Ryan and Julio Jones.
They're not getting a lot of respect right now.
No, they're not.
I mean, you have probably a top. You have a top 12 quarterback in Matt Ryan. You have a top 3 wide receiver. You have an offensive line that's young but getting better. And you have a defensive-minded coach that is doing whatever he can to help that defense. I thought the Falcons, they hung around at the end of last year. They just didn't have the horses to get into the end of the race. I mean, defensively, they had injuries all over. I think the Falcons is a solid choice. They could be a team that could sneak up on Carolina, who I think Carolina played over their head last year. I don't think they'll be as strong defensively as they were last year. So, Kyle, I'm curious to see who you kind of have flying under the radar.
I would think that they will be flying under the radar just because they've been bad for so long. But I'm going to go with the Raiders.
They're an interesting team.
With David Carr, and you have Amari Cooper and Murray, and that defense is pretty solid. If they can keep Holden Smith off the drugs and everything else, he comes back after his suspension and his rehab and clean. Major if. But
yep.
To compare him with Khalil Mack, that's a dangerous combination.
Now, hear me out. Okay? I think the Tennessee Titans could make noise. Okay?
Well, I can see that just because of the division is weak.
They're in a week 1. Kyle, you hit it. They're in a weak division. Marcus Mariota played well as a rookie, based, on what you'd expect from rookies. I think he could make a step forward. They have DeMarco Murray, who I think is going to be very, very motivated. I like what Kendall Wright can bring. I like Dorial Green-Beckham in another year of experience. They added Andre Johnson as a veteran. I don't expect him to dominate anymore, but I think he can bring leadership to a young wide receiving core. And I really, really think that defensively, they're making their strides. They're still weak at corner. Secondary is still really weak, but they have some guys up front that, are getting better at stopping the run. I think Tennessee could be a team you'll see. Maybe not. They're not going to be 3-13 again. I think they could win 7 or 8 games this year. No one has any.
Do you guys think?
Go ahead.
Do you guys think the Los Angeles Rams? I know they're weak at quarterback, but think of their wide receiving core, their running back, and their defense isn't too bad.
No, man, their defense is awesome.
They are the Buffalo Bills. I don't say that in any disrespect to Buffalo fans, but it seems like it's always a good defense, and then they play up to the teams that they play and just down against teams that they shouldn't lose to. And it's kind of been the knock on Jeff Fisher his whole coaching career.
Yep. And go ahead.
Since you touched on that a little bit, did they ever find Trey Mason?
I don't know. He's gone. He's just gone.
Did he forget that they moved to LA and just in St. Louis right now, hanging out with Nelly?
He's been at Rams camp in St. Louis for a week and a half, wondering where the hell everyone is.
I joke, but I hope he's okay. I know he has some family members and everything, but that's a nuts scenario. Talk about a guy that was drafted 3rd round, and he potentially could have been a really good starter for him if Todd Gurley just didn't knock the walls down.
You know what? Now that you mentioned Todd Gurley, I have a quick fantasy question for you. Everyone keeps, I get asked this all the time. I'm sure you guys are hearing it too. What are your, who do you guys think will probably go number 1 overall in fantasy? I've heard, this has been 1 year where I think I've heard a different response from just about everybody I've talked to. A lot of people love wide receivers. Some people are trying to stick with their tried-and-true running backs. I've heard quarterbacks again. Obviously, I don't think Andrew Luck is going to sneak up there like he has in last year. People were in love with Luck. But I'm just curious to hear, what are your guys' thoughts? Who do you think could go number 1? Go ahead, Kyle.
Number 1, Todd Gurley. Obviously, it's a really good pick. I could see Julio Jones going in number 1 spot, too. I really don't think a quarterback is worthy of the number 1 pick. You compare the quarterback numbers for the top 10 quarterbacks, and there's probably differentiates from anywhere from 50 to 75 points.
Yep.
It's not really getting you much of a difference maker if you're taking a quarterback number 1. If in the 16-team league I'm in, if I have the 14th pick and a quarterback's best on the board, I'm taking a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, all the solid running backs and wide receivers are going to be gone, I would think. But I've thought about this a lot. And if I had the first pick, I would consider taking Ezekiel Elliott.
Yep.
And call me crazy because I've always kind of managed to live with that one running back scenario. I won a championship and I had Trent Richardson on my team his rookie year. But that offensive line is just hard not. He made Darren McFadden look good behind that line. Just imagine if they could take 3 down running backs and just put them behind that offensive line the whole game.
Yeah, honestly, whenever people ask me, I've said Ezekiel Elliott just because, one, you're not sure what you're going to get out of Romo. You don't know if he's going to be completely healthy, and history has shown that Romo hasn't been healthy, and that when he is hurt, they become a heavy running team that can still be successful and win games because of that offensive line. 2, I don't know if Des Bryant is all there. I think something's going on. Call me crazy. It's not like I'm plugged in with the Dallas Cowboys or anything, but I don't know, man. He looks fat in camp. he's always been a guy who's never been a good practice player, but he shows up on game day and dominates. But I don't know. I feel like Des Bryant could have a step back this year, whether it's attitude stuff again, whether he has clashes with the front office, whether he doesn't meld well with Romo when he comes back. I think something could happen with Dez where they really go away from throwing the ball. Like, just bringing up Elliott. Let's say Elliott, being a rookie, gets the ball a whole bunch. That pisses Dez off. I think something could happen there around that I think Elliott is going to get the ball a lot. And he's a guy who, on screens, was successful at Ohio State. Ohio State running quarterbacks and running back heavy. Elliott was able to shoulder that load down there. I know being in the NFL is a different story, but I just think he's a guy who can carry your fantasy team. Rookie or not, I think he can do it. Jake, who do you like? I know you and me have talked about this before, but I'm curious to see what you've got for me today.
Well, I like what Kyle said with Todd Gurley. He was going to be my choice, but it really entirely depends on what type of league you're in.
Yep.
For us, we do a 10-person, 2-quarterback league. So I think if you have the number 1 draft choice, it'd almost be weird if you didn't take an elite quarterback right away. That's just my opinion. I'm always going to go with Aaron Rodgers if I get that number 1 pick, just because I'm a Packers fan and I think he's the greatest quarterback in the game right now.
Where do you guys, sorry to interrupt, Kyle, but where do you guys draw the line as a fan of your team and someone who wants to win fantasy leagues? Like, because I find myself kind of having that dilemma sometimes. Our leagues have been somewhat notorious for having one Packer homer that drafts a Packer 3 rounds before before he should go. Where do you guys draw the line with that as a fan of your team, yet you need to make decisions that will help you win a fantasy league? Go ahead, Kyle.
What I do is every year I usually have my top 15 or top 10 quarterback list, top 30 running back list, top 30 wide receivers, so on and so forth. If a Packer player is on my board and it's my pick and they're my best choice, I will take them. I really don't like taking Packers just because, like, I want to watch a Packer game and not have to worry about fantasy football in a sense. Like, if Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a good game, I'm pissed off because he lost it for the Packers and he lost it for my fantasy team. So I try to avoid taking a Packer player at all costs if need be.
Go ahead, Jake.
It's never really been a problem with me in terms of fantasy. I've never really front-loaded Packers players because I'm kind of with Kyle on it. At the same time, if you watch my history, I always kind of front-load Steelers players. I don't know why. I normally always have at least 3 on my team. I don't know why, but I always try to keep it non-biased and go with the best player on the board.
Well, you know you're just going to have Roethlisberger again.
You might as well just give them to me. You might as well.
I don't know what it is. If I'm watching, let's say, if I'm watching an Eagles-Rams game, I'm extremely plugged into the fantasy option. If I watch the Packers versus anybody, whether I have fantasy players in it or not, I don't know if it's just in my head. I'm able to completely tune that out, and all I do is focus on the game. I don't even care about fantasy aspects in that game. I'm somehow able to just shut it off and not able to really care about that. I honestly feel like I will sometimes devalue Packer players instead of overvalue them, because instead of key in on, wow, this guy's really good, I feel like I see them too much and I focus more on their negatives, and I just kind of know not to. So, I'm not going to take Richard Rodgers. Like people last year were drafting Richard Rodgers. Why? Why take Richard Rodgers? Because he's a Packer? I mean, the dude can't run. Just situations like that. So I feel like somehow I'm able to turn it off. But I don't know. I think it's going to be a blast. I think the whole season is going to be entertaining. fantasy-wise. And, I mean, it always comes down to the last couple weeks. The decisions you make in week 13 through 17, I think, are the decisions that win you the league.
Kyle, you wanted to make a comment on my my 2-quarterback league decision for first-round draft pick?
Not necessarily. If it's a 2-quarterback league, and if you can get an elite quarterback, I would definitely say draft an elite quarterback. But I don't know if I would double up to a quarterback. I know I've been in that league with you guys before. It's been a while since we did quarterback. You just leave yourself open for like you're getting you get high quarterbacks. I'll give you that. But like when I said like if you look at the stats from last year, the top 1 to 10 quarterbacks will differentiate anywhere from 50 to 75 points. Probably can't do it. I had to get just spitballing off the top of my head. But and then if you look at the top 10 running backs and you compare them, I feel it's really much more significant difference, I guess. But I'm not. If it's a 2-quarterback league, you'd be crazy to wait around to draft a quarterback.
Look, let me tell you. I did that one year. I can't remember who I wound up. I think I wound up with like Eli and someone else, and it's garbage. If you don't have one in a 2-quarterback league, you're essentially screwed.
Yeah.
But I mean, we already know Jake's gonna have Rodgers and Roethlisberger, so there's really no point in trying to stop it.
Somehow I'll acquire them both.
Yeah. So I'm also curious before we switch it up and stop. What are you guys' playoff picture? Because it's still way too early and injuries are inevitable in the NFL. But what are the teams you're looking forward to be at the tops again this year? Because there's been some change. A lot of the really good teams from last year may be on the downslope. There are some bad teams last year that could possibly be on the rise. I'm just curious. Jake, why don't you go ahead and hit me with some teams you think are going to be at the top this year?
Well, I always like to make early predictions for Super Bowls because I like to look at teams on paper and think of them in their best form. If you look in terms of easy schedules, the Packers have one of the easiest schedules they've had in years.
Yep.
Besides the last month, maybe. So if you take that into account and they are completely healthy, I think they'd get a really good seeding for the playoffs, and they're my early bid for the NFC Super Bowl contenders. On the AFC side, I would like to see a Packers-Steelers Super Bowl again because I think the Steelers have a deadly offense in the AFC.
Are you concerned at all about the Steelers' defense?
Not really. They always have a way of getting to the quarterback. They've been notorious for that.
Yep.
Their secondary is a little bit shaky, but I think their offense is one of the most deadliest in the AFC with that Brown and Le'Veon Bell and Ben Roethlisberger combo. You can't stop a three-headed monster like that.
Well, and they maybe have the best backup running back in the whole league in Williams, who filled in really nice. I had him as a handcuff for Bell last year, and he was fantastic. So, do you have the Steelers in there? Do you think Brady being out 4 games will set the Patriots back?
It might a little. I don't think it'll hurt them in the long run. I mean, Brady is Brady, Gronk is Gronk, and they're always going to dominate. So I think he comes back and they get back on the winning track like they always do.
Kyle, who do you like for the tops of the league this year?
I'll touch on the Patriots. They also have Martellus Bennett.
Yeah.
As a that tight end combination is going to be sick. I'm just going to go. I'll give you the NFC North. I'm taking Packers. East. South, I'm going to go with the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the West, obviously the Seahawks.
Yeah.
As for the AFC, for the North, I'm going to go with the Ravens. I like the Steelers, but I think that the Ravens, it seems like they alternate every other year. But that's just a really tough division. I mean, I would say everybody has a legit chance to win it. For the West, for them, I am going to stick with the Broncos. Quarterback situation is kind of bleak. But, I mean, Peyton Manning really didn't do anything for him last year, and they still ended up winning it with that good defense. I know they lost good defensive players, but it's just a tough division. I'll take for the South, I'm going to go with the Texans.
Texans. Interesting.
I'll take. Which division am I missing? I feel like I'm missing one.
You got the AFC South. AFC East, you took the Patriots.
Yep.
AFC West, you took the Broncos. And the AFC North, you took the you took the Ravens. You got them.
Alright, then for way too good being Super Bowl prediction, I'm going to take the Patriots just because
A pissed off Brady.
remember what happened after not Deflategate, but Spygate?
Oh yeah, 15. No, not 15. Yeah, 15-1.
Yeah, the Patriots made it a mission. They put up 60 points on the Bills one game, I think.
Oh, it was terrible.
I just Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, if they have a chip on their shoulder, it's gonna be hard to beat them. And just with their offensive weapons they have, and then I'm gonna go with the Packers just to give them more.
So, for me, AFC North, I like the Bengals. I don't think they really get enough respect, and they've got two ways of going. They can either sulk about how they blew a chance at going to the AFC Championship game last year because they have two freaking idiots on their team, or they can say, hey, we're a really good team, and if we had Andy Dalton, we would have gone to the AFC Championship regardless of those two idiots. I think their offense is awesome. I think their defense is really good, even though they have some knuckleheads. AFC South, I'm just gonna pick the best quarterback in that division. It's Andrew Luck. It's the Colts. I know they have offensive line weaknesses. I know they don't really have the greatest weapons around Luck, but I think the defense is passable enough to kind of get them to a 9-7 type winning the division. Don't sleep on the Jaguars though. I think that offense is going to be fun as hell to watch. In the West, I like the Chiefs. I don't think they get enough respect really that much either. It's crazy to think that they possibly have the best quarterback in that division with Alex Smith, but they do. Yeah, okay. But their running game is solid, and they have a very good defense. It's really going to depend on what goes on with Eric Berry. He's had some contract disputes. I'm curious to see how that works out. And then it's the Patriots. It's just they're going to destroy everybody. Kyle hit it on the head. They're going to do a Brady pissed off rampage tour, and that's just how it's going to be. Wild card, I have the Steelers coming out of the North, and I think that I really think the Texans have a legit shot to get that last wild card spot. In the NFC, I like Seattle in the West. I like Carolina in the South, although I don't see them winning 15 games again. I think they'll kind of fall back to the median and win 12 or 13. I like the Packers in the North. I like the Cowboys to come out of the East. And I think you may see the I honestly, it's either going to be the Saints or Tampa. No, not the Saints or Tampa Bay. I think I got all four, but I think the Saints will probably get a wild card spot this year. Drew Brees doesn't have much time left. I really do like Ingram as the number one back down there, and I think defensively they're getting better. And then I think the Giants could be your second wild card team. I don't think the Vikings are going to get into the playoffs this year. Call me crazy. I think they're going to be good, but I don't think they're going to get in. And that's what I got to say about that.
I don't have any.
That's.
For my wildcard teams, I definitely take the Vikings and the. I'll go with the Cowboys. No, I'm going to change it. I'm going to go with the Giants for my wildcard. And then for the AFC, I'll take the Steelers and the Bengals. I'll take three NFC North teams.
Three NFC North teams. Jake, you got anyone for wildcards?
That's a doozy, man.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's too early for me to tell right now.
You know who was not mentioned? Arizona.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I take that back. Arizona, I feel is probably, Arizona's a hell of a team.
Defensively, they are really good. I just don't see how lightning strikes 3 years in a row for Carson Palmer for Arizona to not get hurt. I cannot fathom that he will be healthy for them 3 years in a row.
What makes me upset with the Packers is when is the last time they played a playoff game where they got beat? I mean they've lost, but
they've never got. Okay, every time the last 6 years they've lost by no. The last time they got beat was San Francisco in San Francisco. That was the divisional rounds, right?
Yep.
So, and we were up 14-0 that game. Other than that, it has been final play of the game, or overtime, or other crazy bull. Honestly, Jake, do you remember the last time they've got beat in the playoffs, like bad?
Oh shoot. Well, hate to end it, guys, but I'm up for my volleyball game.
All right, thanks for joining us, Kyle. We'll talk to you later, bud.
Yeah, bud.
All right, that was Kyle joining us there. But yeah, I mean, really, the Packers have been one of those teams that you could probably say, Jake, have been one of the more competitive teams in recent NFL history.
Yeah, I can't remember the last time they've gotten blown out in the playoffs. I'd say the last real shootout they had was back when we played Arizona.
Yep.
The following year after the Super Bowl.
Yep. Or before.
And Aaron Rodgers kicked a fumble into Arizona's hands, and that was the end of the game. That was the end of the shootout.
And then the face mask in overtime.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. So he fumbled the ball, but was grabbed by his face mask and pulled down.
Yep. And they just overlooked that completely.
Yep. So he's grabbed by the face mask, fumbles, and that was it. But yeah, I mean, it's you know, they've always been kind of regarded as one of the better teams in the league, but you know, outside of 2011 when they went 15-1, you really don't hear about them being one of the better teams in the league. Just I honestly think them being up in Green Bay hurts them in that regard, because if they were in New York or they were like Dallas, that would dominate the conversation. But there they are, Packers constantly winning divisions, best quarterback in the league, and you know, they occasionally can fly under the radar.
Logan, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that there's been a lot of coaching errors down the road.
I could
in terms of playoffs. I
Yep.
think a lot of play calls are questionable down the stretch.
I can agree with that.
I think that hurts us.
I think that obviously the big glaring one is the Seattle game, where Mike McCarthy single-handedly created the prevent offense instead of the prevent defense. You have the best quarterback in the league, and you go into a shell offensively for the last 17 minutes of the game. And everyone wants to point to the muffed onside kick, and that was terrible. I mean, it was awful. But McCarthy made some very terrible decisions in that game. And I really do think it almost cost him his job. I think that the Packers, even with the injuries last year, I think if they had missed the playoffs, we would have a different head coach this year. And I still think McCarthy is kind of on a quote-unquote hot seat. I think if they have another first-round exit in the playoffs, I think you could see McCarthy being fired. It's either McCarthy will be fired or Ted Thompson will retire. Because we've been successful with our model, how, the way we do things. We don't sign free agents, we build through the draft. But, while we've done that, other teams have passed us by. They go teams that go after free agents, Seattle, Arizona. We've been passed in a lot of situations. Teams in the AFC have gone after free agents and got them. And, this was the year we kind of thought maybe we would go after some free agents, but it just never seems to happen. So I think a decision is going to be made about Thompson or McCarthy if they have a first-round exit. What do you think?
I think so. I think it's only in order to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'll get rid of McCarthy because he built the relationship with Aaron.
Yeah.
I could definitely see Thompson heading out, though.
Yeah, I would be curious to see if Thompson retires and there's a new GM, what his possible decision-making could be with McCarthy. Does he want to bring his own coach in?
Right.
There were rumors that the GM in Seattle, who's a Wisconsin native, had an out clause in his contract that if Green Bay offered him a job, he could take it. He has recently re-signed a contract with Seattle, and it no longer has that clause. So I'd be curious to see who even would be that guy to take over for Thompson. I know that Wolf has a son, the old GM of the Packers during the Brett Favre era, has a son who's within the organization who is seen as maybe the next man in line. But I would be really curious to see what happens. Like, let's say the Packers struggle in the playoffs again. I think you could see changes. Because I see it, you see it, the talent is there. The talent is there.
I agree. We should be pulling in Super Bowls. I think this year, if we stay healthy, I can't stress it enough. I think we got this one this year.
Every year you don't make it to an NFC Championship game with Aaron Rodgers, I think is a year wasted. Because he is a once-in-a-generation type quarterback. With his talent, with his arm strength, with his accuracy, with his mobility, they don't come around like him every 10 years, every 20 years. They don't come around. So, I mean, you really do have to make the best with what you have, and it'll be fun as fans to watch how that goes on. It'll be frustrating at times to watch as it goes on. As you and me both know, we'll text back and forth and pull our hair out and complain about that toss.
That damn toss.
Gotta get that damn toss going. But hopefully we'll be able to keep this thing going. We'll be able to cover it hopefully every week after Packers games, and keep you guys plugged in here to the Two Guys from Wisconsin podcast. So, Jake, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Nothing.
All right, well, we want to thank you guys once again for listening. I know we did have some slight technical issues, so we want to thank you guys for sticking with us all the way throughout this hour and 20-minute pod. Hopefully we can bring you more of this NFL stuff as the preseason begins, and as things start to take shape, we can start to give you more finite examples of maybe who we think may start to take these divisions, as well as our thoughts throughout Packers preseason. So, Jake, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to go ahead and do this. We want to thank Kyle for being on. Hopefully that audio was solid. We're going to try to find a different way to get Kyle going in here, maybe not on his phone. So we'll try to get that working. But I want to thank Kyle for popping on, and we want to thank you guys for listening. So once again, this was the Two Guys from Wisconsin podcast. We will be back next week.